All right, everyone, welcome to our first in-season training module for flag football. This one will refer specifically to the timing rules of our game. Please note that if you're familiar with the NERSA rules as they are written standardly, we do some differences on campus. These obviously take priority over anything you might have read in the NERSA book as it relates to Penn State. So let's speak broadly about our general timing rules. First of all, we play 4 quarters. Each quarter is 10 minutes in length. Halftime is 5 minutes. It should start immediately. Once the referee indicates the end of the second quarter, we should start the clock for the 5-minute halftime. Note that the clock will run continuously for the first 18 minutes of each half unless we stop it for one of the following 3 things. First, if a team calls a charge team timeout, that will stop the clock at any point in the game and will always cause the game clock to restart on the subsequent snap. If we have to take an official's timeout for any reason, maybe that's an injury to a player or to an official, some extended delay for some reason, water break if it's still too hot, then we will restart the game clock on the next ready for play. When the referee blows in the next ready for play, we'll start up the game clock. And then finally, if we have to end for the end of the period, we stop the clock for that reason at the end of the first and third period. In that case, the clock would restart on the snap to start the second and fourth periods. Also important to note, and I didn't state it previously, that the first and third period game clock will start on the first snap. Additionally, each team will receive 3 timeouts per half, but those timeouts for our purposes on campus will only be 15 seconds long. So we should be timing those timeouts as soon as we get to the end of the 15 seconds, a quick warning whistle, and then the referee within 5 seconds of that should blow the ready for play. So you note from the previous slide that we're kind of just cruising through the whole first and third quarter and most of the second and fourth quarter. But when we get into the last 2 minutes of each half, the last 2 minutes of the second and fourth quarter, that's when our new timing rules go into effect, and it's really more of a standard football clock. We will take a 2-minute warning in the second and fourth quarters. That could happen because the ball is dead and we reach 2 minutes, or it would occur at the first dead ball under 2 minutes if the ball happened to be live at the 2-minute mark. And it is important to note that after the 2-minute warning, the timing rules change. And what that means is that sometimes situations will stop the clock during that period of time that may cause it to start on the snap or on the ready for play. So whereas we were not necessarily stopping the clock for all of these things we're about to talk about outside of 2 minutes, under 2 minutes we will, and understanding what those situations are will dictate when we start the clock again, whether that's on the ready for play or the snap. So because this works for me, I've grouped those situations I mentioned on the previous slide into major and minor clock stoppers. Major clock stoppers for me means that the clock stops after the play and won't restart until the next subsequent snap. Those major clock stoppers under 2 minutes include the 2-minute warning itself, an incomplete legal or illegal forward pass, a play that ends out of bounds, a safety, a team timeout, which was always a major clock stopper regardless of the time in the game that it occurred, a touchdown, noting that the try is an untimed down that follows a touchdown, so the clock would not start again until the snap that follows the try, a touchback. Anytime we award B a new series, anytime we award a new series to either team following a legal punt, or anytime a team attempts to consume time illegally. If one or more of these things occurs during a down under 2 minutes, we know we will stop the clock and we will not restart it until after the next snap, with the touchdown being the obvious exception. It is important to note here, however, specifically as it relates to the items relating to new series to B or to either team following a legal punt, that there is the potential that a penalty may mean we are not actually awarding a new series to either team following a legal punt or to B. And in that case, the major clock stopper component goes away. Now, that doesn't mean that they're meant to be complicated by an additional item here. So let me give you a play example. It is 2nd down and 40 to gain from the Team A 35-yard line. Team A throws an interception, but B is guilty of defensive pass interference. B returns the ball inbounds and is deflagged inbounds. All right, we stopped the clock, but ultimately we didn't stop the clock to award a new series. We only stopped it because of penalty enforcement, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So if A accepts the penalty for defensive pass interference, what is ultimately happening is we are not awarding B a new series. We are, in fact, awarding A a new series because of the penalty and the play ended in bounds. This would not cause the clock to start on the snap, but rather would start on the ready for play. However, if B were to run this play out of bounds or intercept it in the end zone and down it for a touchback, those are both major clock stopper situations, and those would cause the clock not to restart until the subsequent snap. So it's important to understand that there are scenarios which may reverse the major clock stopper situations, and just to have an understanding of what is possible here. So for me, the opposite of major is minor. So I've categorized these others as minor clock stoppers, and these are situations that will cause the clock to start on the ready for play or at the referee's discretion. And I've noted that here in the diagrams. So first, a first down, primarily a first down for Team A, is dependent upon the previous play. If Team A gains the line to gain and is deflagged inbounds, then the only reason we stop the clock under 2 minutes is for the first down, and the clock would then start on the ready for play. If, however, Team A were to gain a first down and carry the ball out of bounds, then we know that out of bounds, play ending out of bounds, is a major clock stopper, and the game clock would not start until the subsequent snap. Note that penalty and its administration is also dependent upon the previous play, with the exception that an accepted delay of game foul will always cause the clock to start on the snap under 2 minutes. So we mentioned previously the play I mentioned for defensive pass interference. Let's say we had defensive pass interference, but A caught the pass anyway and then was deflagged inbounds. If that were the case, the administration of the penalty may result in declination of that penalty by A, but that would require us to start the clock on the ready for play. By contrast, that pass were caught and carried out of bounds and the penalty were declined, or even if the penalty were accepted. In that case, the play ended out of bounds, and as a result, the clock would start on the subsequent snap. Note that when the referee takes a timeout, the clock could be restarted at the referee's discretion. We talked about a new series to A that is entirely dependent upon the previous play, which I mentioned previously. Teams that consume time illegally will cause the clock to start on the ready for play. A great example of conserving time illegally could be potentially an intentional grounding for the purposes of stopping the clock. We're late in the game, team rolls, they know that if they get deflagged inbounds, time could expire on them, or the clock could at least run down, and so they throw the ball into an area not occupied by an eligible receiver, for the purposes of both not losing yardage and also to keep the clock and time out. That could be a situation where the referee invokes this, attempting to conserve time, and thus starts the clock on the ready for play. And then an inadvertent whistle. If we blow an inadvertent whistle and the teams elect replay of the down, we will start the clock on the ready for play. If the teams elect to take the result of the play and A is still in possession, we will, of course, start the clock on the ready for play. But if teams elect the result of the play and B or R is in possession, in that case, the clock would start on the subsequent snap, because we would be awarding a new series to either B or R in those cases. So again, it's important to understand the differences between the major and minor clock stoppers as it relates to when we should put the game clock back in action. Some additional timing rules here. Please note that a situation that causes the clock to restart on the snap will always take priority over other timing rules. And you can see from the example here, Team A gains a first down, which causes the clock, is a minor clock stopper and is situational, but also runs out of bounds, which we know is a major clock stopper and causes the clock to restart on the subsequent snap. That means that the clock will start on the snap. That's why, for me, I've called them major and minor. Major means we will defer to it if it occurs, so in that case, the clock would start on the snap. Additionally, note that if there is a timing error at any point in the game, the referee can correct an obvious timing error, provided it's discovered prior to the second live ball following the error. Note also that this window closes at the end of the period once we have acknowledged that the period is officially over. So even though we may not have had a live ball that follows that error, if we screw up and we then declare that the period is over, we can't go back and correct it. So it's imperative, referees, at the end of quarters, that we check to ensure that we have no potential for timing errors before we go ahead and declare that the period has in fact ended. Note that there are special circumstances relating to fouls under 2 minutes, specifically 2 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter. If that occurs and there is a foul, the offended team of any foul has the option to start the game clock on the snap if it would have otherwise started on the ready. So, for example, we have defensive pass interference. the pass is caught and Team A is deflagged inbounds. Team A, in the last 2 minutes of the game, may elect to start the game clock on the snap, because if they didn't without that option, the clock would start on the ready for play. Please note that if the clock would start on the snap anyway, I have no reason to ask A or whoever the offended team is what they want to do. But please note also that this does not apply in the other direction. If, for example, we had a foul, we had illegal contact against the defense, and Team A ran out of bounds by mistake because perhaps they're up and they would prefer that the clock run out, they cannot then request that the game clock start on the ready for play because it needs to start on the snap. So please, it's important to note here that this only works if the clock would have started on the ready for play and the team would prefer that it starts on the snap. There are going to be lots of situations in your games where this option is obvious, so we may want to lead teams into that decision. But if it's not obvious, let's make sure that we're very clearly asking teams. While we're talking about the end of the period, let's deal specifically with extensions of period. We have 4 situations under which we would extend a period if they occurred during a down in which time expires. This gets a little dicey at the end of the first and third quarter, mainly because it is possible that a foul could occur and the ball could become dead with 20 seconds, and there wouldn't necessarily be an additional play in that period because the clock continues to run in the first and third quarter. If that's the case, we would have no reason to extend the period, with one particular exception that I'll get to here in a minute. But otherwise, we need the clock to expire during the down in order to extend it. So here are our situations in which, provided that they occurred during a down in which time expires, we would further extend the period. The first is that there was an accepted penalty for any live ball foul. If there is a live ball foul during a down in which time expires, we will extend the period if it is accepted. There are a couple of exceptions to this, but let me talk about what this means first. So let's say we have flag guarding against the offense, and they end up scoring a touchdown during that play, and they flag guard. If that's the case and the defense elects to enforce the flag guard, we will extend the period because the Team A, we have an accepted penalty and time expires. There are some exceptions for live ball fouls. Obviously, even though unsportsmanlikes are not categorized as live ball fouls, they could occur while the ball is live. So it's important to note the difference there. Additionally, any non-player fouls and unsportsmanlike fouls we would not extend the period for. We should also not extend the period if the foul carries a loss of down or on fouls for which enforcement results in a safety. Important to note here that if we have a loss of down foul on a scoring play on the last time down of the period, the loss of down means we will not extend the period, and the loss of down means that the score does not count. If there happens to be a double foul on the play during a down in which time expires, we will replay the down. If we had an inadvertent whistle, we will replay the down if that occurs during a down in which time expires. And if we have a touchdown scored during during a down in which time expires, we will extend the period for the subsequent try. There are some exceptions here. We will not attempt the try if the touchdown was scored on the last play of the fourth period and the points would not affect the outcome of the game. So if the team that scored is in the lead or trails by more than 3, the points would not affect the outcome of the game. If they're in the lead, B cannot score, so there's no chance for B to come back. If they're down by more than 3, they can't tie, so the game would end. Additionally, you'll note that the period is not further extended if the defense fouls during a successful try and the offended team accepts the result of the play with enforcement of the penalty from the succeeding spot. For example, Team A scores a 1-point try on a play in which there's defensive pass interference, and then they elect to enforce that penalty to start B's series. We would go ahead and end that period if that touchdown or the try occurred during a down in which time expired, and then start the next period following enforcement of the penalty. It is important to note specifically as it relates to touchdowns that a try will always be attempted as part of the period in which the touchdown that it follows was scored. So it's possible that we might score a touchdown in the first or third quarter with around 15 seconds to go, and time would expire before the try. We will not change ends to attempt the try. We will extend the period to attempt the try in those cases. Please note finally that if any of the scenarios that I previously mentioned occur during the untimed down, we will further extend the period with another untimed down. Please note that we also are adhering to a 25-second play clock for flag football. That is to encourage the ball being put in play promptly and legally, and any action that delay that or prevent it, we would call it delay a game. Examples of that include, again, failure to snap within 25 seconds following the ready for play, putting the ball in play before it is declared ready for play. This is a tactic that some teams use when they are less than 5 yards beyond the line to gain and won a new series after having obtained a first down. So this is important, why we ask teams about penalty enforcement in many cases. Also, deliberately advancing a dead ball. I would be careful about this. We're talking about situations in which that was done for the sole purpose of keeping a running clock out of the hands of their opponents and further delaying the game. And then please note that teams are permitted to request a coach-referee conference if they want to discuss a ruling, what they perceive as an error in officials' ruling, even after they're out of timeouts. And if they are incorrect in that conference and the ruling does not change, they would be charged to delay a game. Delay a game in this case is a 5-yard penalty that is always enforced at the succeeding spot. I hope this clarifies a lot of timing issues for you, understanding that the last 2 minutes are vastly different than outside of 2 minutes in either half. Hopefully this makes things a little bit more clear. I hope you're able to take something away from this and continue the great work going into the season.